In this audio, I'm going to discuss about the waiver required in conjunction with a temporary NIV non-immigrant visa waiver. So it's a non-immigrant visa waiver, NIV waiver. It's under section 212D3A. Essentially, an overview, anything in your past, whether you have worked unlawfully, whether you entered unlawfully, whether you entered lawfully and then acquired unlawful status, whether you lied or an officer deems you have misrepresented yourself, whether you have had a past arrest and or conviction, even admissions, anything in your past that is precluding you, that is preventing you from either gaining entry into the United States, so that you're not being admitted into the United States at the port of entry, and or a consular officer is not approving your visa, your temporary visa, then you may require a waiver, this non-immigrant visa waiver. And unless this is approved, you're not going to be admitted into the United States. So it's important to understand, what is this waiver all about? Now, I do go into this in far more detail under consultation if something is in your past, and all about this waiver. And I will also discuss in other audios the documentation you should be taking, and I do really deep dive. This is just a generic overview so you can understand what is this waiver all about. Whenever a waiver is required for your case, it means you essentially have lost your power, because it is now discretionary on whether the consular officer, who has to first of all find the underlying non-immigrant visa approvable, and it is now at their discretion, the consular officer's discretion, do they feel that your waiver has enough favorable factors for them to recommend it to the ARO. So there's lots of little steps involved here. It's not a case of, I've done something in the past, here's my waiver, officer, and they're just going to take it. It does not work like that in the real world. In the real world, you're going to have to go up to the consulate, you're going to have to submit an underlying waiver, for example, a tourist visa. For example, a tourist visa. The officer is going to have to deem the underlying tourist visa, firstly, approvable. And I've gone through this in other audios to make sure that they are not able to justify a denial on a 214B ground, because if they are, then they do not have to recommend the waiver. If the officer deems the underlying visa to be approvable, now their role is to recommend this non-immigrant visa waiver, to waive whatever is in your past that's precluding you from getting the visa, the entry, to the ARO. And I'm going to discuss the ARO. So CBP, Custom Border and Protection, they have established a single office to decide all non-immigrant waiver cases. The Admissibility Review Office, that's where the acronym ARO comes from, the Admissibility Review Office. It's located in Washington. It's a centralized office that provides a dedicated experience resource that is focused on a single priority to provide consistent decision-making on waiver applications. So all these guys are doing is adjudicating waivers, and they are receiving the waivers from the consular officers who are recommending that they review the waiver. Now, I'm discussing specifically a waiver that is handed to a consular officer. You can also hand this waiver at a port of entry CBP, but there's lots of other different steps, and I'm not discussing that in this audio. I'm simply discussing a non-immigrant visa waiver that is required at a US consulate, US embassy, should one be required. So if the consular officer believes, okay, I'm going to recommend this waiver, there's favorable factors here, then everything is done electronically, and it would be done through the State Department's Consular Consolidated Database, CCD, by means of the Admissibility Review Information Service, ARIS. ARIS is entirely electronic, there's no paper, and works through the secure internet communication via the CCD. And for security reasons, there's no provision for outside parties to be part of the ARIS communication process. And that is why attorneys, we have the inability to be part of the ARIS communication between the consular officer and the ARO. It's frustrating, but that's how the system is set up. So who gets referred to the ARO? Now, I go into this in far more detail in other audios, and if you even have any issues in your past, you should be listening to those audios because this is very complex stuff. I will also add a note here. I often hear many clients say, Caro, I never had a problem for years. I went in and out. Nobody ever stopped me. Now all of a sudden I'm being stopped. That is the norm. It is highly advanced security features that CBP has. And just because you entered many times and there's something in your past that was not flagged, it does not mean you won't be caught. It's only a matter of time. So that's why it's important to understand what's going on. So only a favourable recommendation from the consular officer gets consideration by the ARO director. So without this consular recommendation for admission, then you're not going to get your waiver forwarded to the ARO. They're not even going to review it. Nobody's looking at your waiver. And that's another thing I'm very big on preparing my clients, that when you go to the consulate and you know you need a waiver and you have that waiver application with you, you have to know how to handle an officer so they will, in fact, recommend your waiver. Because if they don't recommend your waiver, you're back to square one, where your visa is denied and you're sent away and nobody's helping you. You're not going to be admitted to the United States. You don't have a visa to enter. There are essentially 3 established criteria that the consular officer is going to be looking at when they are determining whether they're going to recommend your waiver. What is the risk of harm to society that you pose if you were to be admitted as the applicant? What was the seriousness of the applicant's criminal or immigration violation? And what is the applicant's reason for seeking entry? There's a lot more involved than that. It's really down to how you present your evidence, what type of evidence do you have, how you answer questions on the day. But these are the established criteria that an officer is going to look at.